Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Raz, and in this video we will discuss about how to compute income tax for individuals who are practicing their profession. So if you're ready, let's start. So in this video, we will discuss about how to compute income tax for individuals who are doing and practicing their profession. So these individuals could be professionals, or they could be artists, freelancers, virtual assistants or VAs, athletes, and other individuals who are doing and practicing their profession, whether online or offline. So we will begin our discussion by asking ourselves, who is a professional? Professionals means persons who derive their incomes from the practice of their profession. This includes lawyers and other persons who are registered with the Professional Regulation Commission, such as doctors, dentists, certified public accountants, and others similarly situated like engineers, architects, and so on. So the term professional also refers to one who pursues an art and makes his living therefrom, such as an artist, athletes, and others similarly situated. So this is according to Section 2 of the Republic Act number 7496. So when we say professional, it does not exclusively mean to those persons who are holding PRC license, such as accountants or engineers or architects. They can also be artists, athletes, freelancers, virtual assistants, and those other persons who pursue art and make living therefrom. So if you are watching this as a vlogger or YouTuber or freelancer or virtual assistant, this video can also be for you, especially when you're trying to figure out how to compute income tax for your incomes, your professional incomes. Okay? So who are considered to be practicing a profession? Professionals who are classified as self-employed are individuals who are practicing their profession with or without license under a regulatory board or body. In the Philippines, we have the Professional Regulation Commission, or the PRC. They receive payment only for the service that they do, but they do not receive benefits in compensation because they are not employees. So unlike employees, professionals receive incomes from the service that they do. For example, if you are an accountant and you are doing consultancy work or accounting work, the service fee thereon is not considered as a compensation because technically you are not an employee. Or if you are a celebrity or a model or an artist, the money that you receive, that you earn from the service that you do for others, are professional fees. They are not compensation income because you are technically not an employee. Or if you are a virtual assistant, for example, if you are an offshore virtual assistant or a professional who render your service for clients abroad, and you're not really considered as an employee of them, but you render service for them for a professional fee, and thus you are considered to be a practicing professional. Okay? Freelancers are also considered as professionals despite not being governed by a regulatory board or body. So if you're a freelancer, you are also considered as a professional. As in the case of bloggers and vloggers, web developers, graphic designers, writers, and other people who provide specialized services. They are also considered as professionals. Okay? They earn incomes from the service that they do, and those incomes are professional incomes. So you might be asking whether they are subject tax or not. Actually, they are subject to tax because, as a rule, everyone earning income who is subject to Philippine taxation should pay an income tax. And you might be asking, what is the applicable income tax for those individuals who are practicing their profession? The default income tax applicable is the graduated rates, and we have discussed that graduated rates thoroughly in our other videos. Unless the taxpayer is qualified and has opted for the 8% optional rate, his incomes shall be subject to the graduated rates. Like those individuals who are doing business, who are engaged into trade, such as merchandising, buying and selling of goods or commercial products, professionals who are practicing their profession are also subject to graduated rates. In fact, they can also be subject to 8% optional rate when the requisites to be qualified for the 8% optional rate are met. Okay, so we will discuss what are the requirements to be qualified for the 8% optional rate, and we will compare which rate, which income tax is a better alternative for a professional individual taxpayer, the graduated rates or the 8% optional rate. So here in your screen, this is the graduated tax table. This tax table contains the graduated rates. It is said to be graduated rates because if you notice, when the tax bracket increases or levels up, the tax due also increases. For example, if as a professional taxpayer, your taxable income during the entire year do not exceed or is not over 250,000 pesos, then your tax due is zero. But if your taxable income as a professional is over 250,000 pesos but not over 400,000 pesos, your tax due is 20% of the excess over 250,000 pesos. So for example, if upon computation of your income, you realize that your taxable income for the entire year is, let's say, 300,000 pesos, the first 250,000 pesos is exempted. But the excess over 250,000 pesos is taxable. And that excess is actually 50,000 pesos. That is 300,000 minus 250,000 pesos. That is 50,000 pesos. Then you multiply by 20%. Okay? But if your taxable income as a professional is over 400,000 but not over 800,000, then your tax due is 30,000 plus 25% of the excess over 400,000. So for example, when you compute your professional income, your taxable income, let's say, reaches 500,000 pesos. The tax for the first 400,000 there is 30,000 pesos, while the excess over 400,000, that is 500 less 400,000, so we have 100. You multiply that 100 by 25%. That means the tax for the excess is 25,000 pesos. Then you add the other 30,000 pesos to get a total tax due of 55,000 pesos. That's it. So it is graduated because as the tax bracket, as your taxable income levels up or increases, the tax due also gradually increases, hence graduated rates. Okay? But this tax table is applicable only from January 1, 2018 through December 31, 2022. Because after December 31, 2022, on January 1, 2023, we will have another graduated tax table. This is in accordance with the train law, the package 1, which focused mainly on the income taxation for individual taxpayers. As I have said just a while ago, a professional individual taxpayer who is practicing their profession, who is doing freelancing business, who is a virtual assistant or a vlogger or YouTuber or an engineer or a practicing lawyer, they could be subject to the graduated rates. But, as I've said, they can also be subject to the 8% optional rate. So that 8% optional rate is another tax which is an alternative income tax aside from the graduate rates. You might be asking, when can a taxpayer, especially a professional taxpayer, a freelancer, YouTuber, vlogger, engineer, practicing lawyer, when can they apply for the 8% optional rate? So the answer is, individual taxpayers, you can apply for the 8% optional rate only if, number one, the taxpayer is not a VAT registered taxpayer. So always ensure that before you apply for the 8% optional rate, check yourself whether you are a VAT registered or non-VAT registered. If you are VAT registered, you cannot avail the 8% optional rate. The 8% optional rate is applicable only to non-VAT registered taxpayer, meaning their annual gross sales or receipts does not exceed the 3 million VAT threshold. The other requirement or requisite is that the taxpayer's annual gross receipts and other non-operating income does not exceed 3 million. That 3 million is actually the VAT threshold. So when we say gross receipts, by the way, this is the total amount of money that you received out from the practice of your profession. So this could be service income or service revenue or a professional fees. If you are a lawyer, accountant, or engineer who is maintaining clients for retainers, monthly retainers, the retainer's fee is also considered as a gross receipt, and you should actually account that when you are trying to figure out whether you exceed the VAT threshold. Okay, so again, that includes professional fees, service revenues, commissions if you are a broker, a professional broker, incentives, and such other fees which arise from the professional service that you render. And the taxpayer does not opt to register under VAT system. It is actually possible that when you are a non-VAT registered taxpayer and your annual gross receipts and other operating incomes would not exceed 3 million, but actually you can have the option to register under VAT system, even if you are not mandated, you are not required to be registered under VAT system, because number one, you are non-vatable, and number two, your annual gross receipts and other operating incomes do not exceed 3 million VAT threshold. So you are not required to be registered under VAT system, but you could registered optionally under VAT system. So if you opt to register under VAT system despite the fact that you are not mandated, you are not required to do so, then you could no longer avail the 8% optional rate. So the main point of these three criteria is that you are not a VAT registered taxpayer, or you are not a VAT registrable taxpayer. If you are a VAT registered, not qualified for the 8% optional rate. If you are a non-VAT registered taxpayer, but your annual gross receipts and other non-operating incomes exceed 3 million, again, not qualified for the 8% optional rate, because you will be required to register under VAT system even if originally you are a non-VAT registered taxpayer. And the third criteria, you should not opt to register under the VAT system. Those are the three criteria to qualify for the 8% optional rate. Like those who are doing business, those individuals who are engaged in trade or business, exempt non-resident alien not engaged in trade or business, who is practicing your profession, you could be subject to either the graduated rates or the 8% optional rate. So if you are a professional whose annual gross receipts and other operating income exceeds 3 million, then always your taxable income will be subject to graduate rates. But if you are a taxpayer whose annual gross receipts and other operating incomes do not exceed 3 million, you could choose whether graduated rates or the 8% optional rate. Okay? And when your taxable income is subject to graduated rates, the taxpayer can choose whether to claim itemized deductions or optional standard deduction. And also, the taxpayer will still have to pay for the 3% percentage tax or the VAT. And if you are subject, or if you will choose the 8% optional rate, you will no longer claim any deduction, whether expenses or cost of service, and will no longer have to pay for the 3% percentage tax. So later on, we will discuss all of these things. We will illustrate how this works. By the way, these rates, the discussions in this video do not apply if you are a practicing professional at the same time an employee. Okay? We will have another video for that, for mixed income earner. Again, in this video, we are only talking about those individual taxpayers who derived their incomes solely from the practice of their profession. If you are that taxpayer who is earning from compensation, from employment, at the same time practicing your profession, the discussions here are not applicable to you. So Juan, a CPA lawyer and a financial advisor, started his YouTube channel in the year 2020, for which he started earning from advertisements. During the year 2020, he had the following data. So we have professional fees from legal advisories, that is 860,000 pesos. We also have service fees from various tax consultancies, that is 588,000 pesos. We have revenues from YouTube and or Google AdSense, and that is 70,000 pesos. And also Juan claimed expenses, and these are the salaries for 3 assistants or employees, that is 270,000 pesos. So these 3 assistants are Juan's employees, okay? Juan is not an employee, but rather he employed 3 assistants. And then he also paid to editors, and that is 66,000 pesos. He also paid for subscriptions to Adobe Premiere Pro for his YouTube, and that is 12,000 pesos. And also other business expenses, of which 20% is unreceipted. That is a total of 136,000 pesos. And also he has depreciation for equipment and tools used for his YouTube channel, and that is 10,000 pesos. We also have here creditable withholding taxes withheld by clients. So that is 50,000 pesos. Okay? So before we go into solution, let us first analyze the problem. So Juan is a CPA lawyer and a financial advisor, and just in 2020, he started his own YouTube channel, for which he starts earning income from advertisements. He received various revenues from legal advisories, from tax consultancies, and from his YouTube channel. And he also paid expenses. But as we know, expenses to be allowed for deduction should be ordinary, necessary, and substantiated. So these salaries for the assistants is actually ordinary and necessary, that is deductible. And also fees paid to editors. This is also ordinary and necessary because he's doing his YouTube channel. So therefore, this is also deductible. Subscriptions paid to Adobe for Premiere Pro for YouTube channel. This is an app, a software. So that is also deductible for video editing, okay? And the other business expenses, only 80% of this 136,000 could be deducted because the other 20% is unreceipted. And the depreciation is deductible, and also, however, this creditable withholding taxes is not an expense, okay? This could be credited against Juan's tax due. Later on, we will show how to compute, how to use this creditable withholding taxes withheld by the clients. We are asked to compute Juan's taxable income and income tax due for the year 2020. So our solution is, first, we will assume that Juan will be using graduated rates and he will be using itemized deduction. So under assumption 1, we will add professional fees from legal advisories, and also service fees and revenues from YouTube channel, from Google AdSense. And we have a total gross receipts and other non-operating incomes that is 1,518,000 pesos. And we will deduct the expenses claimed, that is salaries for 3 assistants, fees paid to editors, and then subscriptions to Adobe Premiere Pro, and then other business expenses. However, only 80% of the 136,000 could be deducted, hence 108,000 only. And then the depreciation of equipment and tools used for his YouTube channel. So we have a net taxable income of Juan using graduated rates and itemized deduction of 1,052,000 pesos. So that's how easy you can compute your net taxable income. Okay, if you have cost of service, then you can also deduct that amount from the revenue. If you have utilities and other expenses which are named to you, then you can also deduct that from your revenue. So now, since we have already computed the net taxable income, we can now compute for the income tax due, and we will be using the graduated rates. So we have here the taxable income of 1,052,000 pesos, and we will look in the tax table where this taxable income belongs. So as we know, this 1 million is over 800,000 but not over 2 million. That means it belongs or it falls in the fourth row of the tax table. And it is said that the tax due for this amount is 130,000 pesos plus 30% of the excess over 800,000 pesos. So, to compute your income tax for your taxable income, for Juan's taxable income, we have here the tax due on the first 800,000 is 130. So, the tax due of 800 here, if you can see your screen, is 130,000 pesos. Okay? If your taxable income falls in the fifth row, the tax for the 2 million is 490,000 pesos. Okay? So, the excess over 800,000, that is 1,052,000 pesos minus 800. You multiply that by 30%. So, that means we have the tax due in excess of 75,600. So, we will add that together to get the total tax due of 205,600. That tax due is supposedly the income tax of Juan that he should pay to the Bureau of Internal Revenue. However, remember, there were taxes withheld by his clients. So we will deduct that from the total tax due to get the income tax due and payable of 155,000 pesos and 600. So from the supposedly tax due of 205, Juan will now only have to pay for 155,600 pesos. Okay, so this is now the income tax due and payable of Juan. Okay, this is how you compute your taxable income and income tax due and payable if you are a professional taxpayer who is like Juan using itemized deduction and under the graduated rates. So again, if you are using itemized deduction as a deduction from your gross income, you should remember that it requires that the expenses or deductions claimed are ordinary, necessary, and substantiated, meaning you have to compile all those receipts. Otherwise, even if you have really incurred those expenses, but if you cannot present evidence or supporting documents like invoices or official receipts that really you have incurred those expenses, you will be disqualified from claiming those deductions. So always remember to always compile supporting documents for those itemized deductions. But there is another way to compute your taxable income without using itemized deductions, and that is claiming the optional standard deduction. Okay, so in our next assumption is that Juan will be using the graduated rates, the tax table, and will be claiming optional standard deduction instead of the itemized deductions. So this optional standard deduction is applicable if you are a professional or a businessman who has or who cannot support evidence or documents for your expenses. So to resolve that, to give you a deduction from your gross income, you can actually claim for the optional standard deduction, and that is 40% of your gross receipts. Okay, so here we will show the taxable income of Juan, assuming Juan will claim for the optional standard deduction. So we have here professional fees and service fees and revenues from received from YouTube or in Google AdSense, a total of 1,518,000 pesos. And since Juan is claiming for OSD, we will just multiply that by 40%. And that 40% is now our optional standard deduction. This is the amount that could be deducted from your total gross receipts and other non-operating incomes. Okay? So that means when computing your taxable income, we have here total gross receipts and other non-operating incomes of 1,518,000. Then we will deduct the optional standard deduction of 607,200 pesos. That means the net taxable of income of Juan using the optional standard deduction is only 910,800 pesos. That's it. That's how you compute the taxable income of a professional individual taxpayer who cannot substantiate their expenses. Okay? If you notice, there are no expenses, there are no cost of service deducted, only optional standard deduction. Because that OSD serves as a deduction, a catch-all deduction for all your itemized deductions for all expenses. So from then, we will compute the income tax due of Juan, assuming that his net taxable income under OSD is 910,800 pesos. So we have here taxable income, and then we will look in our tax table where this taxable income belongs or falls. So it is said that this taxable income is over 800,000 but not over 2 million pesos. So therefore, it belongs here in the fourth column. So to compute the tax due, we have the tax due in the first 800 is 130,000 pesos, and the tax due on the excess, that is 910,800 pesos less or minus 800,000. So the excess, the 110,800 pesos excess will be multiplied by 30%. Okay? So that's 910,800 minus 800,000 times 30% of that, we will get 33,240. Then adding this together, we will get a total tax due of 163,000 pesos and 240. So this is a tax that should be paid by Juan, supposedly. But remember, we have withholding taxes withheld by the clients. So again, we will deduct that 50,000 pesos because that withholding tax is an advance payment of Juan. So the income tax due and payable of Juan is now 113,240. That's it. That's how you compute the income tax due and payable of Juan or of you if you are claiming for the OSD. And take note that under the OSD, under optional standard deduction, the income tax due is lower. Okay? If you are trying to compare, to go back to the last discussion, the last solution that we have, under the graduated rates using itemized deduction, the income tax due is a bit higher than this. Okay? So you can actually save a lot of money, especially if you're a professional taxpayer who cannot substantiate your expenses. Many taxpayer, doctors, medical practitioners really benefited from using OSD because number one, they don't have enough expenses to be deducted from their gross income, hence they will choose to claim for the optional standard deduction. And that is an advantage on their part, especially that they don't have expenses. Again, use OSD if you cannot present evidence or if you don't have any supporting documents for your expenses. However, in our third assumption, we will assume that Juan is qualified to avail for the 8% optional rate. Okay, so the first two solutions that we have are using graduated rates. Number one, using itemized deduction, and in this case, number two, we are using the optional standard deduction. So in our third assumption is that we will assume that Juan is qualified for 8% optional rate and he choose to subject his income or his receipts to the 8% optional rate. So we will find out how much is the income tax due of Juan under 8% optional rate. Okay? We have here, under assumption 3, this is actually among the three alternatives, this is the easiest, the simplest way on how to compute income taxes. So we will just add the professional fees from legal advisories, service fees, revenues from YouTube or Google AdSense, to get a total annual gross sales in other and operating incomes of 1,518,000 pesos. So that's it. And then, since Juan is purely earning incomes from the practice of his profession, we will deduct 250,000 pesos. This is the exemption limit. And again, this applies only, this particular solution applies only if you are solely earning income out of your profession. You are not an employee. If you are an employee and also a practitioner or an individual who is practicing your profession, there is another video for you because you are considered as a mixed income earner. In this case, Juan is not a mixed income earner. He is just a professional practicing his profession. So 1,518,000 less 250,000 pesos, we will have a tax base of 1,268,000 pesos. And we will just multiply by 8%, the 8% bundled rate. So to get the tax due of 101,440. And again, this tax due, that this 101,440 actually covers both income tax and percentage tax. In the previous two solutions that we have, the graduated rates using itemized and optional standard deduction, aside from the income tax that Juan will be paying, he will also pay for the 3% percentage tax. But in this case, this tax, this 101,440, is already a combination or an aggregate amount for the income tax and the percentage tax. And aside from that, we can deduct the creditable withholding taxes that our clients, that Juan's clients have deducted from their payments, and that was 50,000 pesos. Therefore, under 8% optional rate, Juan's income tax due and payable is only 51,450, which is a lot lower, the lowest actually, among the three alternatives. Under the itemized deduction, Juan's income tax due is around 205. Under optional standard deduction, Juan's income tax due is around 100 something. And here, it's only 101. In fact, it can, after we deducted the withholding taxes, it's only 51,440. So if you are Juan, if you are this kind of taxpayer who is a professional having some professional services and YouTube channel, what do you think is the best for you? Of course, this 8% optional rate. So I hope you have learned a lot from this video, and I hope that you would watch the other videos that we have about how to compute income taxes for other individual taxpayers, particularly the mixed income earners. Okay? Thank you so much for watching, and bye-bye!